Our second reading this morning is from the book of 2 Kings, chapter 5, verses 1 through 15a. The healing of Naaman. It's found on page 311 of your pew Bibles. Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Syria, was a great man with his master and in high favor, because by him the Lord had given victory to Syria. He was a mighty man of valor, but he was a leper. Now the Syrians, on one of their raids, had carried off a little girl from the land of Israel, and she worked in the service of Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "Would that my Lord were with the prophet who is in Samaria. He would cure him of his leprosy." So Naaman went in and told his Lord, "Thus and so spoke the girl from the land of Israel." And the king of Syria said, "Go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So he went, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 changes of clothes. And he brought the letter to the king of Israel, which read, "When this letter reaches you, know that I have sent to you Naaman my servant, that you may cure him of his leprosy." And when the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, "Am I God to kill and make alive, that this man sends word to me to cure a man of his leprosy? Only consider and see how he is seeking a quarrel with me." But when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent to the king, saying, "Why have you torn your clothes? Let him come now to me, that he may know that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman came with his horses and chariots and stood at the door of Elisha's house. And Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, "Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored, and you shall be clean." But Naaman was angry and went away, saying, "Behold, I thought that he would surely come out to me and stand and call upon the name of the Lord his God and wave his hand all over the place and cure the leper. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters in Israel? Could not I wash in them and be clean?" So he turned and went away in a rage. But his servants came near and said to him, "My father, it is a great word the prophet has spoken to you. Will you not do it? Has he actually said to you, 'Wash and be clean'?" So he went down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God. And his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. Then he returned to the man of God, and he and all his company. And he came and stood before him and said, "Behold, I know that there is no God in all earth but in Israel." May God add a blessing to our hearing and understanding of the word this morning. Reverend John Jewell tells the story of himself and a friend who was a surgeon and a committed Christian. He was the physician that took care of him when he had a snowblower accident and needed surgery on 2 fingers. During one of the surgeries, all done under local anesthetic, Jewell asked, "Doc, do you believe in divine healing?" "Is there any other kind?" the doctor responded. Good point. But what he really wanted to know was whether he believed in what we would call a miraculous healing. So Jewell asked, "Actually, I wanted to know if you believe in miraculous healing." "Yes," he answered matter-of-factly. "Why do you ask? Do you want me to stop the surgery?" Reverend Mark Trotter notes that healing is a mystery. We don't really understand it, and all we can do is prepare our bodies to receive it. That's what doctors do. They do it with surgery, with medicine, and therapy. They prepare our bodies to receive the gift of healing. And that's all that we can do, too. We can prepare to receive the gift through faith, through prayer, and through openness to the power in creation that heals. Today's reading was about Naaman, a great and mighty warrior and leader of men whose body was failing him. He had leprosy, which was pretty much incurable in those days. The Bible tells us that he was highly favored by his king because God had given victory to Syria through him and his leadership in battle. While Naaman is really one of the main characters in the story, it's interesting to note the other people involved in the story as well. The story goes from the great and mighty Naaman to one of the lowest and least of the people of the kingdom, a young servant girl, a spoil of war who had been carried off from Israel after a Syrian raid, who served Naaman's wife. Now, this unnamed girl has compassion for her master, and so she risks stepping out of her place by going to Naaman's wife with the audacious notion that a prophet in Israel could cure Naaman of his disease. Well, rather than being upset by the boldness of this young servant, the unnamed wife seizes upon the idea and took a bit of a risk herself and takes the idea to her husband. He too is willing to listen to the suggestion of this young nobody, and then takes the idea to the king. And the Syrian king likes the idea and sends lavish gifts to the king of Israel with a letter asking that his servant be healed. So this unlikely idea from an unlikely, lowly, kidnapped, and human-trafficked servant girl snowballs into this tremendous request by the king of Syria to the king of Israel. Now, the Syrian king must have truly valued Naaman to humble himself enough to make this request of the king of Israel, who appears to be in a lesser position of power militarily. Apparently, the Syrian gods are not up to this task, so he will see if Israel's God is. And understandably, upon receiving the letter, the king of Israel freaks out. He's worried that Syria is trying to pick a battle with him by asking of him the impossible. They have already been raiding Israel successfully, and now out of the blue comes this ludicrous request from the king of Syria. How is he supposed to cure this enemy military leader of leprosy? He is not God. What is a humble king supposed to do? The poor guy didn't even have a Dr. Norma Liga to call on for a consult. So, understandably upset, the king of Israel tears his robes, despairing that the impossible is being expected of him, and as a result, Israel is going to be invaded by Syria. I guess it's a good thing that the king of Syria sent him 10 changes of clothes so that he would have something to change into after he tore his clothes. So Elisha hears the story and tells the king not to worry, but to send Naaman to him, which the king does, probably with great relief. And Naaman shows up at Elisha's house at the head of a large procession of horses and chariots. But Elisha doesn't even bother himself to go out and speak to Naaman in person, but simply sends a message to him telling him to go jump in the lake. Well, actually the Jordan River, 7 times. Well, as you might expect, Naaman gets angry at this affront. He had expected great Technicolor theater, a sound and light show, perhaps an earthquake or a bolt of lightning out of the blue. But instead, all he got was a simple message: go wash yourself in the Jordan River. Talk about an anticlimax. Now, to be fair, the Jordan River is not all that much to look at in most places. It's usually not very wide, not very deep, and awfully muddy. The Abana and the Farfar River in Damascus were probably much more impressive rivers to behold. So it's no wonder that Naaman turned away angry. But it was not the messenger or the grandiosity of the rivers that were important. It was the faith and compliance of the one who received the message. Elisha was out to prove that there is a prophet in Israel, and a prophet of the one true God at that. You have to admit that God's responses to our hopes and prayers are not always, and maybe not even often, what we expect. We have to be open to the workings of God in our lives to allow them to work on our behalf. Rejection of God will always cut us off from God's mercies and God's blessings. Here again in the story, God works through the least of those involved in this situation. Naaman's unnamed servants intervene on his behalf and talk sense to him. Hey, boss, if the prophet had commanded you to make some Herculean effort to be cleansed, wouldn't you have at least tried it? And he said all you had to do was to be cleansed was go to the river and wash yourself in it. You know, we've come all this way. Shouldn't you at least give it a try? What have you got to lose? So, listening to reason, Naaman goes down and dips himself in the Jordan River 7 times. And we are told that his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. And Naaman now responds in faith and gratitude for the healing that he has received. He returns to the man of God with all his company and before them makes his statement of faith. Behold, I know that there is no God in all the earth but in Israel. Quite a statement of faith from an outsider, and maybe even an oppressor of Israel. However, while the statement may recognize the truth of God's sovereignty, it may also be an errant statement, in that Naaman may believe that the God of Israel must be worshipped in Israel, like the deities of other countries that were supposedly limited in power to the geographic boundaries of the countries in which they were worshipped. Naaman doesn't seem to appreciate that the universal power and sovereignty of the Lord God, creator of the universe, is effectual everywhere. But evidently his faith is enough, as it has cured Naaman of his disease, and hopefully will make him less willing in the future to make war against Israel. In this story, God and his prophet Elisha were willing to show mercy to a foreigner, someone with very different values and beliefs, and someone who has even worked actively against the interests of Israel. Why would God do that? Perhaps God was paving the way for the eventual inclusion of the Gentiles into the chosen people. Perhaps it was to give Israel some relief from the Syrian armies. Or perhaps it was God is the God of all creation and of all people, and is willing to show mercy to someone who is open to seeking God, who does not know God. Naaman undoubtedly went back to Syria and sang God's praises. There is no way that his cure would be hidden from his soldiers, and no reason for him to want to hide it from his king. So many people would see Naaman's cure and at least have respect for the power and mercy of the God of Israel. It's a continuation of the promise to Abraham to bless all the people of the world through those that encounter Abraham's descendants. Through the prophet Elisha, Naaman's family, and probably the other families associated with Naaman's family, were blessed through a meeting with Abraham's descendants. God was remaining true to the covenant with Abraham, just as God remains true to the new covenant we have in Jesus. And let us remember that God worked through the least of Naaman's servants to help effect the healing that Naaman needed. If it wasn't for the young Israelite servant girl and the servants that accompanied Naaman to Israel, he probably would not have been cured. Then, as now, the Lord works in mysterious ways, using ordinary, unsung, and in this case, unnamed people to help effect God's purposes. As lowly servants influence the mind and actions of the powerful leader of the Syrian army, may we add our voices to the song of praise of God's grace and mercy for all the people of the world. And may we add our testimony so that those who do not know the Lord may hear God's word and be healed. And may we also reach out in faith to testify to the grace, mercy, healing, and inclusion of our God to those in positions of power and those who are the least of us. Blessed be the name of the Lord who shows us all grace and mercy, as God did to Naaman. Amen. body of Christ broken for you. The body of Christ broken for you. The body of Christ broken for you. The body of Christ broken for you. Karen, the body of Christ broken for you. Broken for you. Jeff, the body of Christ broken for you. Tanya, the body of Christ broken for you. John, the body of Christ broken for you. Edith, the body of Christ broken for you. Body of Christ broken for you. Is the gift of grace for you. So the body of Christ broken for you. That's the body of Christ broken for you. You're the body of Christ broken for you. Glory, the body of Christ broken for you. John, the body of Christ broken for you. Vicky, the body of Christ broken for you. Just enough wick. Now I invite you to turn to page 711 in your hymnals, for All the Saints. As we go forth from this place, may we remember all the saints who have touched our lives and strengthened our faith. And may we go forth to share the love and healing of God with a hurting world. Now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you and give you peace. Amen.